They called him the Lion, not just because of his mane of hair or his calm, regal demeanor, but because when Lennox Lewis stepped into the ring, he was the king of the jungle. Cold eyes, calculated mind, and a right hand that could silence an arena in a single moment. In a sport filled with chaos and emotion, Lewis was different. He didn't fight with rage, he fought with precision. He wasn't the loudest, but he was the smartest. Many believed the heavyweight era had ended after Tyson, Holyfield, and Bo, but Lewis proved them wrong. He was the bridge between generations, the man who outlasted the wild 90s and stood tall as the last undisputed heavyweight champion of the 20th century. People often mistake calmness for weakness, but Lennox Lewis showed the world that discipline, intellect, and strategy could dismantle even the most violent storms. So how did a kid born in England, raised in Canada, and doubted at every step, rise to become the man who conquered them all? This is not just the story of a boxer, it's the story of a chess master in gloves, a man who redefined what it meant to be a heavyweight champion. You're watching Boxing Chronicles. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, because today we dive deep into the legend of Lennox Lewis. Lennox Claudius Lewis was born on September 2nd, 1965, in West Ham, East London, a working-class district where toughness wasn't a choice, it was survival. His mother, Violet, was a single parent, determined to give her son a better life. When Lennox was just 12, she made a bold decision. She took him across the Atlantic to a small town in Ontario, Canada. It was a move that would quietly shape a future world champion. In those early years, Lewis was an outsider, too British for Canada, too Caribbean for Britain. He was tall, quiet, and often misunderstood. Yet beneath the calm exterior, there was something brewing, an unshakable sense of determination. At school, teachers noticed his natural athleticism. He excelled in basketball, football, and track, but it was boxing, introduced to him at age 15, that finally gave him direction. His first coach, Arnie Bohm, saw more than raw power in the teenager. He saw intelligence. Bohm taught him not just how to punch, but how to think. "Boxing is chess, not checkers," the young Lewis would later say, a quote that perfectly captured his future style. By the time he was 17, Lewis had already won several national titles in Canada, yet his environment was far from glamorous. He trained in modest gyms, often running through snowy streets before dawn. While others partied, Lennox studied tapes of Muhammad Ali and Larry Holmes, absorbing their discipline and patience. What began as a way to stay out of trouble had become a calling. He didn't fight because he loved violence. He fought because he loved control, the feeling of turning chaos into order. From the cold streets of Kitchener to the bright lights of the Olympic stage, the boy from East London was no longer just surviving. He was preparing to conquer. Lennox Lewis's journey from a gifted amateur to a professional powerhouse was anything but straightforward. In 1983, he burst onto the international scene at the World Junior Championships, showcasing not only his physical gifts, but also his sharp ring IQ. A year later, he represented Canada at the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics. He didn't win gold then. He was stopped in the quarterfinals by Terrell Biggs, a disappointment that would haunt him. But that loss lit a fire that would define the next 4 years of his life. Lewis refused to quit. He returned to the gym with a scientist's obsession, studying footwork, balance, and the timing of great champions. Every setback became data. Every sparring session became research. His patience paid off at the 1988 Seoul Olympics. In a stunning display of composure and power, he knocked out Riddick Bowe in the gold medal match, capturing Olympic glory for Canada. That moment didn't just win him a medal, it announced him as the future of heavyweight boxing. Turning professional in 1989, Lewis signed with British promoters, intent on making him the next big UK star. But the path wasn't smooth. Many British fans still viewed him as too Canadian, while in North America, he was too British. He didn't fit the mold, yet, inside the ring, his talent was undeniable. He started his pro career with a string of dominant knockouts, each one displaying a blend of elegance and destruction. Still, doubts lingered. The world saw his potential, but few truly understood his vision. Lennox wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing mastery. He wanted to prove that intelligence could dominate brute strength. And soon, the world would see that this quiet, analytical fighter from London by way of Canada was not just another contender. He was the man who would bring order to boxing's most chaotic era. If Lennox Lewis's power was his weapon, then his preparation was his forge. His entire career was built on an obsession with discipline, repetition, and perfection. He never entered a fight unprepared. Every move, every jab, every combination was part of a larger blueprint. Unlike many heavyweights of his era who relied on raw aggression, Lewis's camp was rooted in strategy. He trained under legendary figures like Emanuel Steward, the genius behind the Kronk Gym in Detroit. Steward was known for refining natural talent into surgical precision, and with Lewis, he found the perfect student. Together, they didn't just train for opponents, they designed solutions for problems that hadn't yet appeared. A typical day in Lennox's camp began before sunrise. Road work first, long, rhythmic runs that built endurance and patience. A champion must enjoy the monotony, he once said. After breakfast, he'd move to shadow boxing, practicing foot placement until it was instinctive. In the afternoon came the heavy bag and mitt work, where he honed his legendary jab, one of the sharpest and most authoritative in boxing history. It wasn't just a punch, it was a statement. His sparring sessions were intense chess matches, not wars. He studied range, timing, and rhythm. Steward would often stop the session mid-round and demand adjustments. Don't fight like them. Make them fight like you. Lennox understood that message deeply. His style wasn't about chaos, it was about control. Lewis's physical conditioning was equally meticulous. He balanced powerlifting with calisthenics, preferring function over bulk. Swimming sessions improved his stamina without punishing his joints. His diet was disciplined but flexible, lean meats, vegetables, and just enough carbs to sustain his long training days. There were no shortcuts, no ego lifts, no theatrics, just craft. But what truly separated him from others was his mental preparation. Lewis treated fight study like an engineer analyzing blueprints. He watched his opponent's habits frame by frame, how they blinked before throwing a hook, how their balance shifted when tired. You can't just hit harder, he'd say. You have to hit smarter. Even in rest, he trained his mind. Visualization was key. He would sit quietly before fights, picturing every punch, every angle, every possible counter. By the time he stepped into the ring, he had already fought the match 100 times in his head. That was the essence of Lennox Lewis. Calm under fire because he had already seen the storm. His preparation turned uncertainty into inevitability. When the bell rang, there was no panic, only execution. Emanuel Steward once described him best. Lennox isn't just a heavyweight, he's an architect. He builds victories one brick at a time. And through that methodical, almost scientific approach, Lewis built something far greater than a boxing career. He built a legacy of mastery. Inside Lennox Lewis's mind was a world of calculation, patience, and unshakable belief. He didn't fight like a brawler, he thought like a strategist. To him, boxing was never about rage or ego, it was about control. The moment you fight angry, he once said, you've already lost your plan. This mindset was built from years of discipline. Lewis didn't crave fame or chaos, he craved clarity. In training, he practiced mental visualization before every sparring session, imagining himself under pressure, seeing punches before they came. He trained his body to react calmly to chaos, to treat violence like a puzzle to be solved. He wasn't easily intimidated, not even by names like Mike Tyson or Evander Holyfield. Where others saw danger, he saw data. Every fighter has patterns, he said. The key is to find them before they find you. That analytical calm was his greatest weapon. When others tried to provoke him with words or antics, Lewis remained composed. He had no interest in shouting matches, he preferred to let his jab speak for him. His coach, Emanuel Steward, described him as one of the most intelligent heavyweights I've ever trained. That intelligence wasn't just technical, it was emotional. Lewis understood how to handle defeat, pressure, and success. When he lost, he didn't spiral, he studied. When he won, he didn't celebrate too loudly, he planned for the next. Even at the height of fame, Lewis avoided distractions. No wild nightlife, no entourage drama, no self-destruction. He lived like a monk in a sport filled with chaos. That level of self-control gave him longevity, and it's why, unlike many of his peers, he walked away from boxing on his own terms. Lennox Lewis didn't just master opponents, he mastered himself. And in boxing, that's the rarest victory of all. By the mid-1990s, Lennox Lewis had evolved from a promising champion to a calculating force that dominated the heavyweight division. His jab became his sword, his ring IQ his shield. Every time he entered the ring, he turned a brutal sport into a masterclass in control. One of his first defining moments came in 1993 against Tony Tucker, a veteran who had gone the distance with Mike Tyson. Lewis outboxed Tucker over 12 rounds, showing poise and patience rare for a young champion. That victory announced that he wasn't just another knockout artist, he was a tactician. But just as his rise seemed unstoppable, he was humbled by Oliver McCall in 1994. A shocking second-round knockout that tested not his chin, but his will. True to his nature, Lewis didn't react with excuses or chaos. He rebuilt. He analyzed what went wrong and reinvented himself, joining forces with Emanuel Steward. Under Steward's guidance, Lewis refined his balance, timing, and mental sharpness. The result? A complete fighter. In 1997, Lewis avenged that McCall loss in one of the strangest fights in boxing history. McCall broke down mid-fight, crying in the ring as Lewis calmly finished the job. Redemption was quiet, clinical, and complete. Then came 1999, a year that cemented his legacy. Against Evander Holyfield, the reigning legend, Lewis fought to a controversial draw in their first match, despite clearly outboxing him. The rematch later that year was justice served. Lewis dominated again, earning a unanimous decision and becoming the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. The first since Riddick Bowe refused to fight him years earlier. And then, the fight that defined an era. Lennox Lewis versus Mike Tyson, 2002. It wasn't just a fight, it was an exorcism of history. Tyson was the myth, the monster, the chaos that had haunted the division. But on that night, Lewis dismantled him piece by piece behind a piston jab and ruthless right hands. The knockout in round 8 wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. The era of fear was over. The era of mastery had begun. Lewis's final statement came against a young Vitaly Klitschko in 2003, a brutal, bloody battle that ended with Klitschko's face torn open and Lewis declared the winner. It was a fight that showed grit, heart, and experience, proof that even in the storm, the lion still roared. By the time he retired, Lennox Lewis had a record of 41 wins, 2 losses, and 1 draw, with victories over nearly every elite fighter of his generation. He walked away on top, something few champions ever do. He didn't just win titles, he restored dignity to heavyweight boxing. Every champion is defined not by how high he climbs, but by how he rises after falling. For Lennox Lewis, setbacks weren't roadblocks, they were blueprints for evolution. The first came in 1994 against Oliver McCall. It was supposed to be a routine defense, but one split-second mistake, a dropped guard, an exposed chin, and everything collapsed. Lewis was stunned, knocked out in the second round, his championship dream shattered. For the first time, his calculated calm met the chaos of defeat. Critics called him overrated, soft, even robotic. Yet in silence, he began rebuilding. He didn't panic. He studied. He refined his defense, hired Emanuel Steward, and turned pain into progress. That loss became his foundation. When he later avenged McCall, he didn't celebrate with rage. He simply nodded as if to say, lesson learned. Then came 2001, his second and last defeat. Hasim Rahman, a massive underdog, caught Lewis with a thunderous right hand in South Africa. It was shocking. For a moment, history threatened to repeat itself. But Lennox Lewis was no longer the same man from 1994. He returned with fury channeled into focus. In their rematch just months later, Lewis delivered one of the most devastating knockouts in heavyweight history. A perfect overhand right, that erased all doubt. "I'm not just the best," he said afterward. "I'm the last man standing." Those losses didn't define him. They completed him. Each comeback revealed the core of who he was, a fighter who refused to stay broken. Where others spiraled after defeat, Lewis adapted, evolved, and emerged sharper. By the end of his career, his 2 losses became symbols of his humanity and his greatness. Because true champions don't just win belts. They master the art of coming back stronger. Lennox Lewis didn't just win fights. He redefined what it meant to be a heavyweight champion. At a time when the division was dominated by chaos, he brought intellect. When others sought to destroy, he sought to outthink. And when boxing's golden era seemed to fade, he became its bridge, the last undisputed heavyweight champion of the 20th century. His legacy rests on more than titles, though there were plenty. Olympic gold, multiple world championships, victories over nearly every major name of his era. Tyson, Holyfield, Klitschko, Briggs, and Morrison. But what truly made Lewis special was how he won. He didn't brawl for drama. He executed for dominance. His jab wasn't just a punch, it was a philosophy. Every move was deliberate, every adjustment born from hours of study. Future champions studied him. Fighters like Vladimir Klitschko, Anthony Joshua, and Tyson Fury all cite Lewis as the model of the thinking heavyweight, a man who proved that strategy could rule power. Even outside the ring, his conduct set a standard. No scandals, no chaos, no downfall. He left the sport clean, respected, and whole. Emanuel Stewart once said, "Lennox Lewis was the most complete heavyweight I ever trained." Coming from the man who trained champions like Hearns and Klitschko, that statement speaks volumes. The lessons he left behind extend beyond boxing. Discipline over emotion, intelligence over impulse, grace over chaos. Lewis showed that greatness isn't about being the loudest. It's about being the last one standing with dignity intact. In an era that glorified destruction, he built his empire on composure. And long after the cheers faded, his legacy remained. Proof that true power comes not from rage, but from mastery. In the story of boxing, some fighters roar and vanish, while others, like Lennox Lewis, roar once and echo forever. He was never the wildest, the loudest, or the flashiest, but when the dust settled, he was the last man standing. The last undisputed heavyweight champion of his era, the man who mastered chaos through calm. Lewis didn't need drama to prove dominance. His greatness was built on intelligence, discipline, and quiet ferocity. He studied opponents like an engineer, struck like a surgeon, and left the ring like a king. When others burned out chasing fame, he walked away with everything: his health, his legacy, and his pride. There's a line that defines Lennox Lewis. He wasn't born a monster. He was forged into one. Every mile he ran before dawn. Every round he fought in silence. Every lesson learned from defeat. Those were the fires that shaped him. Today, his story reminds us that true champions aren't just built in the gym. They're built in the mind. And in that sense, Lennox Lewis wasn't just a fighter. He was an idea. That intellect can conquer intensity, and patience can outlast power. So now it's your turn. What part of Lennox Lewis's journey inspired you the most? Let us know in the comments below. And if you believe in the art of discipline, the power of control, and the spirit of boxing, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories here on Boxing Chronicles.